What? Yeah, those people are wrong. Sorry, guys. Try again next time.
I think that is directly analogous to what the best explanations of what human beings have done. And what happens, from my perspective, is that the thinking about morality is so difficult for some that it's just easier to say, this person told me, or this God told me, or this is the case. Because having to sit down and...
Yeah, we should really just chalk up the is-ought problem to just, some people feeling like it's too hard to think about morality. Yeah, that's super reasonable. No, of course that's ridiculous. No, the reason why people believe in thinking about morality in different ways than we think about the material world is because the is-ought problem exists, of what I've been talking about. There's no way to ground his goals in something that is materially. You have to assume them either arbitrarily, or you have to assume that they're based in something higher outside of the material universe. Those are your two options. There is no option C, as far as I'm aware. Although, if you have an option C, please enlighten me. So, yeah, it's not that people are, not smart enough or find it, too hard to think about morality in this way. It's actually because the is-ought problem is yet to be solved, and in my opinion, is internally insoluble. So that's just a bad way of framing that, Dillahunty. I disagree strongly.
Do the sort of life inventory to figure out, hey, what's best for us? I mean, even figuring out what the goal of the game is harder for some people, and so they accept...
No, it's actually impossible for all people. You can't figure out what the goal of the game is the same way you can figure out the weight of a mineral or the amount of protons in a nucleus. You can't figure it out. There's no material reality to base it off of. You can't figure it out the same way one does scientifically. You have to go into the realm of the metaphysics. You have to. And that is fundamentally different from the scientific thought that he's talking about. It's not the same. It's not the same. And people, it's not just too hard for people. It's actually really different.
Accept and fall into these traps of authoritarian models of this is what your goal is. And the thing that's probably frustrated me the most, which I talked about on a college campus last year, is if the government was running around dictating to people what their job was going to be, what their future was going to be, as some regimes have done, nobody would appreciate that. Nobody, almost nobody. I'm sure somebody would be, very happy, thank you, I couldn't figure out what to do. I'm glad I'm going to be, a brain surgeon, even though I don't know anything about it. But if the government...
Communism be like, I don't know if that's going to stay in. I'm going to say it anyway. And I'm not going to elaborate any further.
If it was dictating things like that, there would be revolts. There have been revolts. And yet, curiously, when people think there's a God or a divine being or some cosmic consciousness or collective consciousness that has dictated a goal for them, they celebrate it.
This is exactly Peterson's point. It's so funny. This is exactly what he was saying. If you try to dictate people the little specific rules, the tactics, let's say, of here's your job, here's what you're going to do, nobody likes that. It's not optimal on the individual level, and sure as hell not optimal on the societal level. However, if you let things go organically, but you let things go organically on the micro level, on the tactical level, things work better, which is why, planned economies suck, usually, and free markets or having a large amount of free market influence is usually good. Right? Stuff like that. And Peterson actually agrees with that. This is his whole point. His whole point is that a rules-based system of this level of specificity is not optimal and insane and not how people work. But he is perfectly willing to grant that on the broader metaphysical stage, that harder limits outside the edges, that assuming a goal to the game and uniting under said goal to the game, discovering that or assuming it, depending on if you're an atheist or a religious person. And again, discovering in the religious sense is not the same thing as figuring out in the scientific sense. For anybody who thought you caught me debunking myself, you're wrong. But yeah, this is exactly Peterson's point, is that Dillahunty's saying you shouldn't dictate the minutia, and therefore you shouldn't dictate the abstract. And what Peterson is saying is that the assumption of a united abstract, of controlling the abstract, is not remotely comparable to controlling the minutia. He actually agrees that you shouldn't control the minutia. That's his entire point. So I think Dillahunty is debunking himself a little bit here, or at the very least agreeing with Peterson.
And that contradiction...
Agreeing with Peterson in terms of the tactic on the micro-tactical level.
That has dictated a goal for them, they celebrate it. And that contradiction has bugged me for years.
It's not a contradiction, though, for the reason I said. Let's go back to the chess metaphor for a second. Like, this argument would say that we shouldn't, when we have a robot that we want to play chess, we shouldn't dictate to the robot the goal of the game is to win at chess, is to win and also to play chess under the definition and the rules of chess. Right? So he said that he loves that theory. He said that he thinks human operates the same way, but then he rejects the idea that there should even be the defining set of rules or the goal in the first place. So Dillahunty, like, I might just be dumb, you know, that's always possible, but I'm pretty sure he's being a little bit contradictory here, because for one thing, the tactical level and the strategic level in terms of rules are not the same for a variety of reasons. Two, on the minutia details, he actually agrees with Peterson here in this example that those types of rules are bad. And on the macro level, Peterson says we need meta rules, and Dillahunty is saying that we don't want those types of rules, and that it's bad when humans are dictated those rules. Even though at the very beginning of the video, Dillahunty was saying that creating a rules-based system is good. Now he's saying that it's bad for them to be dictated to you, but if we were going to carry over the chess analogy, the chess computer was given his goal, the goal and the defining rules by a higher intelligence, a higher power outside of its understanding. If you want to carry that analogy over, that means God, bro. So again, you're going to have to show me the evidence and tell me why you think that you can discover the goal of the ultimate game of life and the limiting rules of the ultimate game of life in any definitive and objective and non-arbitrary and actually useful way. Because in your chess metaphor, it was given to you by a higher power, which is us. So if you want to carry that analogy over, you're assuming God there. And if he doesn't, which I know he doesn't, and he says we shouldn't have rules dictated to us, and instead we should just figure them out for ourselves, you got to solve the is-ought problem, and you got to do that. So this is the eternal thing that's in his way and is in the way of many atheists in my mind.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt that systems of belief, let's say, including religious systems of belief, can devolve into a kind of totalitarian rigidity. True.
But yeah, no, Peterson is definitely like a crazy fascist who's like way too extreme. Yeah, that's definitely what that sounds like. But a little bit more bitter. This is my first video back in a while, so I'm not used to being very chill, like a Pangburn version of me. So, you know, you might get a little bit more fire for a bit. Yeah, no, Peterson's hedging, and of course he's absolutely right. There's a danger there, but usually dictatorial regimes don't just dictate, oh, here's the goal for the country and here are some of our broad span rules. In fact, every country does that, by the way. Every single country does that. All of them. Usually we only call them dictatorial regimes when they start defining the minutia for you, which is exactly what Peterson was railing against. So you wind up in a place where Dillahunty says he likes the rules, but he doesn't want them to be dictated by anybody ever, and instead we just have to figure them out, which to me just sounds like utter chaos. Just subjectivist, arbitrary warring. And even, yeah, like that's what that sounds like to me. So no, I don't think Peterson backtracked at all here, really.
I don't think you can necessarily lay that at the feet of religious belief. I mean, human systems...
No, I'm laying it all at humans.
Yeah, I mean, right, it's okay, so it's fine.
I just view humans using religion in that way.
Yeah.
So, What's the verdict? Jordan Peterson did not debunk himself, and the reason he did not debunk himself is because there's a difference between the tactical micro-scale, small-scale rules that he thinks are non-optimal, and the meta rules that's just set basic, that define the game, basically. Limits so basic that they define what the game is, and also define the goal. Those general rules are not the same thing as what he was talking about. So he did not debunk himself in any way. If anything, Dillahunty contradicted himself a little bit, or at least seems to. I'd have to think about it in more detail than I can in the reaction. But the only way for Dillahunty's comments to not be contradictory to what he was saying, to not be self-contradictory, is for him to assume, again, that human beings can figure out the best meta rules. That we can just figure them out and that those rules will be true in some non-arbitrary sense. And I don't think that that's right, because the is-ought problem exists. To go back to the chess metaphor, I suppose the rules of chess are arbitrary in some sense. However, you wouldn't argue that the computer following the rules is arbitrary because they were given to the computer by a higher power, right? So I don't think it's exactly the same. Dillahunty was being weird in my mind, but Peterson certainly did not debunk himself. That much is clear. But I want to hear the verdict from the Pangburn audience. Let's find out. I'm going to vote yes, because you know who I am. 56% no. What? Yeah, those people are wrong. He did not debunk himself because there's different kinds of rules, and he explained that, and that was pretty evident. I explained that. So for you 56% out there, if you're watching that video, congratulations, you're wrong. They're not the same types of rules. His books recommend tactics, and recommend tactics in their titles, but in terms of the content, they're usually general attitudes and meta strategies. And the real reason why it's wrong, the final debunk of this idea, is that Peterson is recommending particular rules. He's not forcing them on everybody. He's not saying that everybody should do all of these things by use of force, right? So it's like there's a difference between trying to code a computer to always use a certain opening versus recommending some general opening principles, like don't immediately sack your queen in the first 3 moves, or, don't fall into a scholar's mate, or, put pawns up the board. Like these general principles, which if you left the computer alone could figure out. If you recommended the general principles, it would just kind of speed it along, as opposed to more minute things like never move to h4, right? Or never move h4 first move, right? So I think Peterson's rules are kind of just more vague and more abstract than the tiny tactical stuff that he is saying is wrong. Although they're less abstract than the defining rules of the game and the goal, they're somewhere in the middle that stem naturally and somewhat inevitably from the rules and the goal, and it's just kind of a way of helping people kind of accelerate their learning, as opposed to them trying to flounder around and figure out themselves, like the supercomputer who is given nothing but the rules and the goal, because human beings aren't supercomputers. These are kind of some general guiding principles to accelerate that learning. So again, his types of rules are different than the types of rules he was running against in the video. He did not debunk himself. Sorry, guys. Try again next time, and I will see all of you for that next time.